The Cockatrice Boys by Joan Aiken, Chapter 4. When the Cockatrice Belle left Lincoln, snow was beginning to fall, wafted over the Lincolnshire wolds by a bitter wind from eastern Siberia. Fierce little flakes stung and clung. They climbed and caked on the windows, and Aiken sighed as he thought of all the extra cleaning and polishing that would be necessary the next day. "But this weather should help us discourage the snarks. Should help to discourage the snarks," said Major Scanty, rubbing his hands together as he looked at the snow piling against the windows of the officers' mess. "Just so long as we don't get derailed or stuck in a drift on our way to Netherbroughton," muttered the colonel pessimistically, "or as long as the expeditionary force don't get lost in the blizzard." "Who are you thinking of sending out?" inquired Lieutenant Upfold. "Well, let me see. Bellswinger had better be in charge of the main party. At least 15 men will be needed. They can be in charge of 2 Gredlin hounds apiece. Bellswinger knows the country, apparently. He says he used to stay with cousins in Willoughby when he was a lad." Upfold looked disappointed. He had hoped to be given command of the troop. "You can lead the relief force, Upfold, should one be needed," the colonel told him kindly, and Upfold's face brightened up. The monsters to be found in these uplands were unfamiliar to the men. They were mostly sphinxes and gorgons. Being of southern origin, they were not very active or mobile in such wintry weather, and made no serious attacks on the train until it had crossed the River Trent and was climbing into the hilly country again. But at Netherbroughton, where they stopped to refuel with cakes of condensed diesel, there was a sharp-pitched battle with griffins and hydras who came coiling up off the track as Lance Corporal Engineer Pitkin was performing the hazardous operation of sliding diesel bricks out of the aluminum containers slung over the officer's mess truck. The monsters were finally routed by means of flamethrowers, but not without loss of life and a broken glass panel in the driver's cab. "We'll need to replace that before we can move, sir," said Ensign Driver Catchpole. "Can't drive her along with all the weather blowing into the cab." "How long will it take?" "Matter of a couple of hours, sir." "In that case," said the colonel, "we had best send the expeditionary party to Willoughby from here, while the work is put in hand. What do you say, Bellswinger?" "I'd say yes, sir." "It can't be more than 8 or 9 miles to Willoughby from here, and the climatic conditions are helpful." If helpful, the climatic conditions were not enjoyable. A zipping blizzard was sending horrendous skeins of snow like wire whiplashes into the men's faces, while the expeditionary party were putting on waterproof boots and fur-lined mitts and balaclavas under their snark masks. Bellswinger said to the colonel, "Can I take drummer boy Doc and Purswitch along, sir?" "In heaven's name, what for? You won't be needing a drummer." "No, sir, but it struck me. These hounds we're going for to fetch have all been reared in Germany, right? And it's all Nottinghamshire to a nutmeg. They won't understand English words of command." "Humph," said the colonel after a pause. "I hadn't thought of that. But what use will Prestwich be in the circumstances?" "The lad's a fluent German speaker, sir, on account of how it seems he spent 2 years underground in the strong room of the Barclays Bank, Shepherd's Bush. While he was there, he learned German from 2 old lady school teachers who happened to be taking shelter there too." "Oh, I see. Very well. You may take him along. Corporal Knock!" "Yes, sir." "Well, the party are gone. I want you to construct 30 strong, roomy dog kettles for the Gridlin hounds that we should be taking on board." Yes, sir." "How big will the hounds be, sir?" "Major Scanty says they're about the size of an Irish wolfhound, that is, about 1 meter high at the shoulder, and length in proportion, naturally." "I see," said Corporal Nark. He scratched his head. "And you want 30 kennels, and where are these kennels to be put, sir?" "Why," said the colonel, "they will have to go in the men's mess." "I see, sir." Meanwhile, Aiken, interrupted in his eager perusal of Chapter 5 of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, was joyfully hauling on gloves and boots and snark mask. "Oh, Aiken," said Sana, rather upset at his suddenly being whisked off like this on active service. "You will be careful, won't you? Don't forget that baby griffins are the nastiest. Their teeth are poisonous." "Don't you fret your head. I'll be careful," said Aiken. giving her a hasty hug, and I'll bring you back a gridlin hound for your very own. He seized his drum and bounded away. For you might as well bring the drum along, Bellswinger had said. The monsters don't like a rat-a-tat one bit, and my guess is that it may be helpful to have covering sound while the handover is taking place. You know your route, Bellswinger? Asked the colonel. No problem, sir. We just follow the line of the Mink Canal. It runs due west from Netherbroughton to Willoughby. Why is it called the Mink Canal? Aiken inquired, trotting along through the hallways, through the howling, snowy dark between Bellswinger and the flat, inky water of the cut, which kept swallowing the snow as if it were endlessly thirsty. Why, a matter of 40 years ago, long before all the hullabaloo with monsters, there used to be a big mink trade between Norfolk Broads and Ireland. Mink was in fashion just then in Dublin and Cork, as there was all those wild mink running loose about down in Norfolk. They used to catch them and ship them by the cut straight across to Portmaddock and on to Ireland. Take that, you ugly brute! He broke off to aim his snart gun at a wyvern who was stalking them. Croaking, transfixed, it splashed down into the canal. So no question, that's the way they'll have brought these here hounds. Trained from Germany, submarine to the Wash, canal boat in from Boston. Now you watch out, my boy. There's a whole posse of foot monsters ahead. The foot monsters were easy enough to tackle with electric prongs, which overthrew and unbalanced them in their flight. Being such top-heavy creatures, once they had fallen into the water, they almost inevitably drowned. So battling doggedly against intermittent depression and dreadful weather, mixed monsters, wind, snow, and sleet, the party proceeded on to Willoughby on the Wolds, which had once been a handsome little town with a spacious view, north, east, and west. Now it lay in ruins. Shattered walls were crusted with snow, which lay thick and untrodden along the approach roads, and the broken church tower rose up like an empty candlestick in the middle of the deserted churchyard. But it's Willoughby, all right, said Bellswinger, when they reached the outskirts after a 2-hour jog. I remember it from when my dad's cousin Samson used to live here. There was a fine old inn called the Drum and Gaiters, right by the canal. It used to be. Keep moving, lads. Once we stop, the trices start to gather like wasps around a jam jar. But as they approached the graveyard, a troubling sound greeted them, a sad and eerie howling which seemed to issue from somewhere in the middle of the village. Sounds like it might be coming from the church, muttered Bellswinger. Look sharp, lads. The monsters are mustering thicker and thicker. Aiken, you best be the rally. Ensign Noggs will keep you covered. Seems there'll be plenty of mischief ahead. Indeed, when they rounded a corner and came within view of the churchyard, a terrible sight met their eyes, for just at that moment a large black snow cloud slipped away from the front of the moon, whose rays displayed everything in stark black and white. The churchyard was all scattered with corpses. Aiken wondered if there were not more bodies lying on trampled snow than were buried in graves beneath it. He gazed in fright and horror, still mechanically rattling away on his drum. Men, dogs, and monsters lay strewn all over such other in awful confusion. Saints preserve us, muttered Bellswinger, staring about him. Look at them all. Looks like every single dog's been done in, and all the folk, too. But I thought these dogs were champions at fighting snarks, said Aiken. So they are. Don't stop your tattoo, boy. Those pesky critters are mustering up above, like gulls to a shipwreck. But there's basilisks, too. Here, you can always tell. See, there are basilisk prints in the snow. He pointed to a huge 3-toed print. No dog, nothing can stand up to them. Keep together, boys. Guard each other's backs. Same outwards. Make for the church. There's still some basilisks about. You can tell by the whistling. Embattled, struggling, keeping close together, fighting for their lives, the group made for a door in the church tower and stood with their backs against it. Aiken all the time whacking away on his drum, like a demented woodpecker, while the monster swooped overhead and dived and pounced and made racing attacks across the snow with outstretched wings and clashing beaks, and then paused and backed away, annoyed and alarmed by the staccato vibrations. "Help!" called a faint voice from inside the church door, and again they heard that lugubrious howl. Could there be a dog inside there? "Help!" "Let us in, then!" shouted Bellswinger, pounding on the door with the handle of his hydra hammer. And the door at last swung open, and they all tumbled through into darkness, one on top of the other, with Daikin desperately wrapping himself around his drum in order to protect it from other people's snark prongs. "Who's here?" cried Bellswinger. The answer came in an exhausted, feeble murmur from somewhere at floor level. "Tom Flint, Canine Rescue Mission." It was followed by a series of weak, melancholy barks. "What's been going on in this town?" demanded Bellswinger, as the troop gradually sorted themselves out and somebody had the sense to fetch and light up a battle flare, which illuminated the scene with a greenish glow. They soon found that they were in the vestry, at the west end of the church under the bell tower. It was an empty, stony chamber. Everything portable had long ago been removed. A stone stair climbed the wall to a trapdoor hole, which presumably led to the belfry. "Bells," said Sergeant Bellswinger, looking up. "Monsters can't stand bells. Are there bells still in this tower, Tom Flint?" "How would I know?" mumbled the thin, tattered man who had let them in. "I only came in this place for the first time today, and I never want to see it again." "Well, we better find out," said Bellswinger. "You, Presswitch, you look good for a few pulls on a rope. Mitch, Bragg, Minch, Coldarm, Forby, Wintless, up those stairs on the double, and let's see if we can give those brutes a bit of a ding-dong." The men, with Daikin, clambered up the stairs to the belfry above, and were relieved to find long, dusty, beaded bell ropes dangling down through holes in the ceiling. The bells themselves must be in yet a higher loft, out of sight. "We better hope they're still up there, and no metal-eating monsters munched 'em up," said the sergeant, giving a tremendous heave on the rope nearest him. A solemn clang responded from above. "Right, boys! Give those critters out there a real concert. 1, 2, 3, pull!" They pulled with a will, and the bells began to reply in a brassy, chaotic chorus. The men heaved and dragged and swung and swore and hauled and jerked until they were first hot, then dizzy with fatigue. Luckily, there were only 9 bells, and 20 men had managed to survive the trek along the canal and the skirmish in the churchyard. As one ringer grew too dizzy to go on, another climbed up, tapped him on the shoulder, and took over the rope. The noise they made was tremendous. When somebody relieved Daikin of his rope, he crept carefully down the stone stairway and sat wearily on the bottom step. His knees would only just hold him, and his head rang and sang with the row that was going on up above. Slowly he looked about him. A few of the men had lit a small fire. Daikin wondered where they had found the wood for it. Could they have used pews from the church? He did not like to ask. They had brought out carrots, parsnips, and rolls spread with mushroom paste, which Mrs. Church had supplied for the expedition, and were toasting these on flames. Daikin looked about for the man who had let them in, Tom Flint. There he was, being offered a toasted roll by Ensign Quickstep. He took it slowly and stared at it as if he were too tired to bite. Then Daikin's eyes opened wide, for beyond Tom Flint in the shadows he noticed for the first time a great beast, the largest dog he had ever seen in his whole life. "Is that a Gridlin hound?" he asked Fred Cold Arm, who sat on the floor beside him, wearily chewing on a toasted carrot. "Reckon so. Couldn't be out else, could it? He's a big feller, ain't he? Pity there's only one of them left after we come all this way and took all this trouble." "Mind you," put in Private Wintless, who sat behind him, "if there'd been 30 of those Gridlin hounds, like there was supposed to be, dear knows where we could find space for them all on the old bell. Ask me, it's just as well there's only one left." "But what went wrong? I thought these dogs were supposed to be hot stuff against monsters." "That feller there, Tom Flint, he said it was something to do with the customs inspector at Boston, a man called Coulter." Listen, he's telling how it was that chap's fault. Dyken went over to squat by the fire and listened as he munched his roasted parsnip. There was 15 Hanoverian dog handlers with the troop, explained the doleful Tom Flint, and they had instructions to come all the way on the canal boat and see the dog pack handed over to your lot, and give proper directions for feeding and exercise, and words of command and all that. But that Coulter, the harbour master at Boston, he wouldn't let the Hanoverians come ashore off their submarine. Very top-loftical he was. Say they'd got the wrong papers or summat, and he couldn't authorize 'em to go no further. One of those jumped-up knobs in office he is, acts as if his hair is hung with diamonds. So poor German dog handlers was real upset, for they said nobody would know how to give the dogs their orders, and the beast wouldn't understand out that was told them in English, and nor they could, as it turned out. But that didn't cut any ice with his nibs, Mr. Coulter at Boston. All he would do was send for me and my 6 mates at the Boston Canine Rescue Mission to tell us we were to accompany the dogs in the canal boat. So the Hanoverians, real furious mad they were. I've never seen coves so upset. They give us some written notes on a bit of paper, diet rules and all that, words of command, and then back they had to go. Back to their submarine. What happened to your 6 mates from the mission? Asked Bellswinger, who had come down the stairs at this moment, having been relieved by Ensign Pretty. The bell ringing up above was slowing down and becoming more fragmented. Tom Flint gave a wretched glance toward the door. Out there, all of 'em bought it, he said simply. I saw Ern munched up by a bandersnatch, and Sam Todd was cut in half by a hammerhead, and the poor dogs was just outnumbered and demolished, and done for, without anybody to give 'em the proper orders. It was a right shambles, I can tell you, and some chaps from the village turned out to help us, but they was all cut down too. He took a gulp of parsnip wine which somebody had passed him, and coughed miserably. So now there's just one of the dogs left, said Bellswinger. What's his name? How would I know, grumbled Tom Flint. We never got introduced. Dyken began to feel rather impatient with Tom Flint. Certainly it was a sad and shocking tale he had to tell. Dyken thought how much he would like to see Mr. Coulter, the Boston harbor master, compelled to jump off a high tower or swallowed up by a bandersnatch, but just the same he felt that Tom Flint might have made a bit more effort to look after the hounds left in his care and get to know them. After all, the trip on the canal boat must have taken at least a day. What were the words of command on the bit of paper the handlers gave you? Dyken said to Flint. Bless me, boy, I've forgotten what they said. After all that ruckus out there, and that scrap of paper's halfway down some wyvern's gullet by now. Why don't you have a go at the poor beast? Bellswinger suggested to Dyken. See if you can get in touch. Perk him up a bit. He looks mighty sorry for himself. Not surprising, seeing as all his friends have been killed off, said Wintless. He's cut about a bit himself, poor fellow, said Dyken. He went and knelt in front of the enormous dog, who gazed back at him mournfully. The animal was covered in thick, rough gray fur and had a long, curved tail. His ears were upstanding and lined with white whiskers. His eyes, under tufted brows, were hazel brown, and the tip of his nose was black. His front legs were about the length and thickness of Dyken's arms. He was somewhat clawed and battered, and there was a smear of blood down his chest. But none of the wounds seemed too serious. It was grief and shock that had done the worst damage. Would you like something to eat, you poor old boy? Dyken asked him in German. The dog slowly wagged his tail. His eyes brightened just a little. Anybody got a spare mushroom roll? No? Oh well. You may have some of mine. Here. A mushroom roll vanished in a snap of enormous jaws and a lengthy pink tongue. Stand up. Osties and shy. Let's have a look at you, Dyken suggested, still in German. Obediently, the great dog rose to his feet. All the men were now watching in interested silence. Looks like Dyken's got his wavelength all right, somebody murmured. That's all very fine, but what's the use of one hound, said Coldarm. Better than none, snapped Bellswinger. Can you make him sit down again, boy? Sit, Dyken told the dog in German, and he sat. Clever old fellow, Dyken rubbed the dog's bushy eyebrows and bony skull. "You're a real brainy one, aren't you? And I'm sorry as can be about your friends." "Why hasn't he... Hey! There's a bald patch in behind his eyebrow." "No, it isn't. It's been shaved, and there's something tattooed there. Marks. Can you hold the light a little closer this way, Fred?" When Fred Coldarm held the light near the dog's head, it seemed that the marks tattooed in his skin were letters. Dyken traced them over with a careful finger. U-L-I, Yuli. "Is that your name, Yuli?" he asked the dog. Gravely, the great creature stood up again, lifted its enormous right paw, and laid it in Dyken's hand. A spontaneous round of clapping broke out among the men. "I reckon you got yourself a friend, Dyken," said Coldarm. "Hey, listen. The bell ringing stopped upstairs. Do you think they've all dropped in of heart failure up there?" "I wouldn't mind taking another turn," said Dyken, and ran up the stairs, followed by Bellswinger and several others. But when they reached the belfry, they saw that the ringers had their faces pressed eagerly against the slit windows. "Daylight's coming, at last, or almost," said Forby joyfully. "And there ain't as many monsters about, Sergeant. Don't you think it's time we made a break for it?" "You ain't as daft as you look, Forby," the sergeant told him, peering out. "And it's snowing like blazes again. That cuts down visibility. Let's go." "Hey, see who's following us up?" The great dog, Yuli, had climbed up the stairs behind Dyken, and now came to stand with his head pressed against Dyken's knee. "I doubt we're going to have trouble getting him down again, though," said Bellswinger. And that is where we will pause.